Hey everybody, how you doing? It's me again, Truth Teacher, coming at you with a new video. I know I've been missing in action for a while, but I'm back today. So you can see the thumbnail, the description of the topic of today. Who is the real creators of hip hop? Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the past 2 years, you know that there's been heated discussions going back and forth as to who really originated this thing that we now call hip hop. And, there's people who are saying that this is something that came strictly from African Americans. There's other people who are saying that this was a combination of people who were involved, being Black Americans, West Indians, and Hispanics, in particular Puerto Ricans. And I was watching one of Derek Cologne's videos today, and he was doing like a reaction to a video, to an interview that Tariq Nasheed had on Vlad TV. And he was interjecting, like giving his evidence to support his perspective. Somebody in the comment section made a reply that I think was very important. And I actually agree with that perspective more than anything else. Based on my observation and my experience growing up in the Bronx, grew up in Soundview. Well, I was born in Soundview. I lived on Evergreen Avenue and then crossed the Major Deegan and was living on Wheeler Avenue. And I went away when I was young, about 67, 68, 69, 70. I think I was like 3 or 4 years old when I moved to Jamaica. But I came back in 1976, and from that period until 1992, I was living on the Grand Concourse on 172nd Street, and went to all the neighborhood schools there, CES 64, CES 70, went to Wade 117, and Taft High School. So I was in the Bronx when this thing that we call hip-hop was evolving, and I witnessed it. Now, mind you, at that time we didn't have a name for this thing. This term that we're using now, hip hop, is a term that came about later. I didn't start hearing this term being used until I want to say the early to mid 80s. Before that, it didn't have a name, and it wasn't just one particular thing. It was a combination of things. It was, music was part of it, dance was part of it, and graffiti art was part of it. Those were the three main elements that, you have to mention fashion also. Fashion was a big deal, back then. Probably more so than it is now. So was dancing. And when I say dancing, I don't just mean breaking. I mean, there were other dances that we did besides breaking. But the point that I want to make is that you have all these people claiming that, this is FBA culture, Black American culture. And what I want to say to that is I disagree based on this reason. What we're calling hip-hop now was a subculture. It was an urban subculture. And not everybody was into it. So I see all of these debates going back and forth, forgive me because I really suck with people's names. But I think DJ Charlie Chase saying that when he started DJing, Puerto Ricans were giving him flack about it. And people have taken that and ran with it, say, oh, you see, Puerto Ricans, they wasn't into this, they came along later. Here's what I want to say. Just because you were in the Bronx at that time does not mean that you were automatically hip-hop. Just because a person was a black American in the Bronx, in New York City, doesn't mean that they were necessarily hip-hop. Just because you were Puerto Rican in the Bronx doesn't automatically mean that you were a salsero. Just because you were West Indian, Jamaican, doesn't mean that you were into reggae, doesn't mean that you were automatically into calypso or soca music. Who was hip-hop were the people who were involved in it, and that was a small subsection of the population. I'm going to give you an analogy. At the same time when we had, this thing that we're calling hip-hop, hold on a second. Amazing, there's like nobody here when I'm like, before I start setting up, nobody here, but the second I come, like, motherfuckers want to come with all this goddamn noise. All right, whatever. Okay. Point I was making is that at the same time in the 70s, mid to late 70s, when hip-hop is this thing we would call hip-hop starts to evolve, there were other musical movements happening in New York City at the time. We had new wave, but most visible were punk rockers. So punk rockers were predominantly white Americans, but could we say that every white American was a punk rocker? No. Punk rock was a subculture, and who created it and who it belonged to were the people who were in it, who were involved in it, who were doing it. That's who created it. That's who it belongs to. So the same analogy goes for hip-hop. Just because you're black American doesn't mean you are automatically hip-hop, doesn't mean that you created hip-hop, doesn't mean that it belongs exclusively to you. Who was involved in it is who it belongs to, is who it created it. And when we're talking about it, we're talking, once again, we're not just talking about the musical aspect of it. We're talking about all the elements. And the ones who were involved in that were Black Americans, West Indians, and Puerto Ricans, who were living that subculture, who were living that life. That's who created it. That's who it belongs to. So to me, I remember when I was growing up, the older generation, doesn't matter what ethnic group they were from, whether they were West Indians, whether they were African Americans, whether they were Puerto Rican. The older generation had no respect for what we young people were into. They thought it was stupid. They thought it was nonsense. My best friend was African American. And what we would hear from the grown-ups in his family, grown-ups in the African American community, particularly when we're talking about the musical aspect. Oh, that's just garbage. This chicka 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 chicka. Hippity hippity hippity. That's not music. Like, they would tell us that's just a fad. 10 years from now, nobody's even going to be talking about that. I remember I would have like my summer jobs, and here we go again, like, Nobody was over here, but now that I'm here, you all want to be over here talking all fucking loud on your phone and shit. Whatever. Hopefully you don't hear that. But I remember I would be working in the city, summer job programs. I remember one job in particular. I was working at Con Edison down on the east side of Manhattan, a little bit down from the UN. That was the main Con Edison building. And all of the people who were there, they were all African American. And, they would hear me, listening to, like the music that I liked. And they'd be, oh, what's that? That's garbage. That's not real music. And then they'd start listing off, older generation artists and all. That's real music. This shit that you all young people are listening to today, that's a fad. That's not real music, You're not playing any instruments. There's not a band. It's just a whole bunch of noise. This is just a phase. And in 10 years, nobody's even going to be talking about it. That's what they would tell me. And I heard the same thing from elders who were Puerto Ricans and West Indians. My parents, oh my God, my parents were like, they didn't, they were like, the best music that was around was the music we listened to back in the 50s and the 60s. They said, this isn't music. Years from now, when you're looking back on the memories, having memories about the music, what are you gonna remember? Like nobody respected hip hop or what came to be known as hip hop. They didn't respect our fashion. They didn't respect the dancing, breaking. That was just like, they looked at us like, like we were possessed or something, just rolling around on the floor, getting your clothes dirty. They were like, that's just like a whole bunch of nonsense. That doesn't even make any sense. That's not even dancing. Graffiti to them was vandalism. They didn't see the art. They didn't see the artistic merit in it. I did. I thought it was beautiful, like the way they would, do the letters and the coloring and the murals and all of that. I saw it as art. I didn't understand why no one else saw it as art. I didn't understand why you could go to the Museum of Modern Art and you got a big canvas, big white canvas, and it's just got like one splotch of paint in the middle of the canvas, and that is high art. It's worth thousands of dollars. And I remember we went on a school trip to the museum, and we're looking at this stuff that looks like anybody could do it. And I asked them, why is this worth thousands of dollars? And they couldn't give me an answer. Meanwhile, on the subway cars and on the side of buildings, we've got these amazing pieces of structure and color, and looked like it came out of like a fantasy world, dream, science fiction. And nobody recognized that as art. I don't know why, I used to think to myself, why don't people hire these kids to do, to beautify? I thought it was beautiful when you would see like a graffiti piece on the side of a building. I thought that was beautiful. I didn't understand, like, all these shop owners, why didn't they get these kids to make, pieces of art for their, their storefronts and stuff like that? This thing that we were doing got no respect from anybody. Nobody respected it. Nobody. I remember when, it was really, you hardly heard it on the radio. MTV became a big thing on cable. It was a struggle to get this music played on MTV. Every step of the way to gain recognition, this music, this culture had to fight for respect every step of the way. And the resistance came from everybody, whether they were black, whether they were white, whether they were Hispanic. That older generation, none of them respected it, any aspect of it at all. I remember, who was it? Was it Tommy Hilfiger? I think it was Tommy Hilfiger, because that was when I said, I'll never give that bitch my money. He came out and he made a statement that his clothes, because we started blowing up, wearing those fashions from these designers. And he came out with a statement that he never intended his clothes to be worn by those people. And so even the people that we were supporting didn't respect us. Nobody did. We took elements of clothing that nobody paid attention to, and we put them together in a way that was fashionable. We created fashion out of scrap, just like we did with the music and the culture. We created something from bits and pieces and scraps that we sampled from here and there. We put it all together and made something new, something remarkable. Maybe the adults didn't see the value with it, but it resonated with young people around the world. So to me, this argument of who created hip hop? Who created hip hop was the subsection. I'm going to say it again. It was a subsection of Black Americans, because every Black American was not into hip hop. They didn't appreciate it. They didn't respect it, even if they were young. If they were coming from a certain background, to them that was that, ghetto trash. I heard that a lot. It belonged to a subset of West Indians, because not every West Indian in the Bronx was into hip hop. And it belonged to a subset of Puerto Ricans who were into it, who were living that life, because every Puerto Rican was not appreciative or respectful of this thing that we were all doing. So if you want to talk about who it really belongs to, it belongs to the people who were actually in it, who kept it going, who kept it alive when everybody else was calling it crap. They're the ones who it belongs to. And, to make another analogy, hip hop is like, what came to be known as hip hop is like that kid that when it was born, everybody called it a bastard. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. Nobody wanted to acknowledge it. They didn't even want to babysit the bastard, right? But now that little bastard grows up and becomes somebody noteworthy, right? And now everybody wants to claim, oh, I'm your auntie, I'm your uncle. I remember you when you were only this big. Yeah, I used to babysit you all the time. Yeah, but right. Now that you're grown and you're successful, now everybody wants to be associated with you. But when you had no name, when you had no recognition, when you were just fresh out of the womb, nobody wanted to have anything to do with you. But now everybody and their mama want to come running out the woodwork, coming out from underneath the rocks and the cracks, talking about, this is our culture. No, it wasn't. Y'all had no respect for it. So the ones who really deserve the recognition and the respect are those people that I mentioned previously, who actually put in the work to contribute to its birth, who supported it. Not somebody just because you happen to be of a particular ethnic group, now this belongs. No, it doesn't. You had no experience. You had no appreciation for it. You didn't like it. You didn't want to have anything to do with it. You didn't believe in it. And you couldn't wait until it dropped dead. Let's just keep it 100. That's the truth of who created hip hop. Who does hip hop belong to? Hip hop belongs to the people who actively worked to put it together, who contributed to it during its evolution, and who supported it. That's who it belongs to. And everybody else is a Johnny-come-lately wanting to hang on to coattails and take credit for something that they had no part in, really. So that's just my take on it from my perspective. I will see you guys in the next one. And yes, to address the elephant in the room, yes, I did cut off all my hair. No, not because I'm going bald. I still got a lot of hair on my head, as you can see. These is not receding hairline. I was born with it from day one. Can show you my baby pictures. But I will see you all on the next one, when I'll tackle another issue about this whole hip-hop thing. All right, go check out one of my previous videos. I did a video on this like a couple of years ago. Go check that video out, and I'll see you again next time. Peace.